NASCAR's next-gen car is in the final run of its debut season in 2022, and so far it has provided some good for the sport. It has produced some fantastic racing, a cool new look, and parity throughout the garage that we haven't seen in quite some time. So far in 27 races, we have 17 different winners, and it looks like we're on track to beat the all-time record for most amount of different winners in a single season, which was 19 back in 2001. And it's very possible to beat that record with 9 races to go. However, there is a bigger and more scary issue with this next-gen car: cost cutting and safety. Now, ever since the beginning, the next-gen car has always been the subject of curiosity and controversy. Since the beginning, cars have been built in their own shops. Teams had their own fabricators and had to build their cars from scratch. But with this car, everything is being built out of shop and has to be purchased through vendors, making it a spec car. The goal of this is to, of course, bring down costs so that competing in the Cup Series doesn't have to be so expensive as it has been in years past. Now, I was very curious to take a look at what this new car could bring. Safety has always been an issue with this car since the beginning. From the rumor of the dummy being quote-unquote killed, which I said to have been 100% false by NASCAR, to the March 2020 crash at Fontana when William Byron backed it into the wall during a test session with the next-gen car. Officials were worried about how hard the hit was, and the G-forces were surprisingly high, and they were worried about the car being too stiff, especially in the rear end of the car. As we have seen throughout 2022, safety has always been a subject with the next-gen car, and it's gone worse and worse, and more drivers are being more vocal about it. NASCAR Man on Twitter posted this thread regarding every single incident regarding the next-gen and safety. Being discussed, like I mentioned, that the car was too stiff, that there was very few crush zones available. Now, since that thread has been posted, the concern of safety has only grown even more. The thread provides numerous examples of NASCAR's issues with the next-gen car and safety. From the smallest of contexts, like Christopher Bell's Texas crash or Ty Gibbs' Watkins Glen clash, hurting more than they originally had hoped for, to Denny Hamlin and Bubba Wallace's crash being the worst of their career, to, of course, the big crash involving Kurt Busch at Pocono on July 10th, leaving him with a concussion, and he hasn't raced since that incident. Now, to be fair, NASCAR has discussed these incidents in a recent article and are looking at to find problems for the next-gen car for next season. However, veteran driver Kevin Harvick stated that NASCAR focusing on driver safety is not on top of their priority list.
I mean, every hit that I've pretty much taken in the car hurts, so we hear it week after week after week. Seems slow, the response in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. But I think from my previous experiences, I've had some things that I've presented that were 3 years into having no response to. So from a driver's standpoint, so it's the things that I think that the drivers would consider most important may not rank as high on that priority list when everybody's not out there banging into stuff themselves.
Yano said it was because it costs money, and costs a lot of money.
Well, that tells you where we rank. Money is more important than the safety of the car. So that's the perception that seems to be coming with it. Yeah, it's not better from a crashing standpoint. The hits are violent, and at Sonoma, I hit the back of the 2-car so hard that it locked my Hans out. And I kept going, and it was just over the hill. They checked up, and I hit him, and it locked my Hans. And every hit is violent, and some of the smallest hits hurt like they shouldn't hurt. And it's just, everybody knows that the car is too stiff, and I think when you look at the crash data, it just doesn't represent what the drivers are feeling in the car.
Now, Kevin Harvick is one of numerous drivers, like Denny Hamlin's and been another one, on NASCAR's lack of information regarding updates with this new next-gen car in terms of safety. So yeah, the next-gen car is not safe, or at the very least not safer than it was with the Gen 6 car in terms of smaller hits. Denny Hamlin also mentioned after his crash at Daytona that he felt like he had been hit in the jaw by a boxer. And I mentioned Bubba Wallace. He further brings up that his crash at Atlanta and Talladega were worse than his 2018 crash at Pocono, which, for a crash like that to be worse than Pocono, is very scary. Not only that, but Bubba cursed out NASCAR after his Daytona crash after he stated that he was surprised and never thought that he would have the breath knocked out of him after getting hit in the rear, which seemingly didn't seem as that big of a deal. So we discussed the safety aspect, but now let's take a look at the cost-cutting issues with the next-gen car. And this past weekend's race at Darlington Raceway exposed it wide open. Now, like I mentioned, one of the things with the next-gen car that they wanted to focus on was that it'd be less expensive to be competitive. No longer do you have to spend top dollar every single time if you want to have a shot at winning. You could have the occasional what we saw at Darlington with Petty GMS and Eric Jones having a good run or even winning a race. They wanted so that there'd be more parity throughout the field, it would cost less, therefore it wouldn't be so expensive for a team to operate. But not only that, more than likely NASCAR even cost cut it in terms of safety or how cars and parts are being maintained and expected. The majority of the work done in terms of safety with this next gen car was done through simulation and not through real life events. Granted, COVID-19 halted a lot of real-life testing, but still, they could have pushed the car back even a year later if they weren't so sure about the safety of the next-gen car, or even if the parts were up to date. But this wasn't known until now. When many people thought that the next-gen car would be cost-saving, I don't think anyone expected even the parts to be cheap compared to the Gen 6 car. During the Southern 500, Kevin Harvick's car randomly caught on fire and was forced to retire. Now, as crazy as it seems, this isn't the first time we've seen cars randomly catch on fire. In fact, it's happened a lot in a short period of time. I can list 5 other instances where we've seen cars catch on fire within a 6-week period. At Richmond, Chase Briscoe caught on fire in Stage 3, Alex Bowman earlier in the year at Darlington, Chris Buescher at the Indy GP after contact with Bubba Wallace, and Joey Logano in the same race when the checkered flag flew, Cole Custer the following weekend at Michigan, and now this with Kevin Harvick. Not only that, but apparently according to Reddit, JJ Yeley driving the number 15 Ford at Darlington also caught on fire, but TV never picked it up. To have 6 fires in a 6-week period is extremely unusual, especially when it happened under very mysterious circumstances. Now granted, some of these problems have been fixed by NASCAR. For example, the contacts between Chris Buescher and Joe Logano, there have been reasoning for why those caught on fire, but still, it's very odd that any bit of contact, or even if you're riding by yourself, your car can magically catch on fire. Now, you can say that this is potentially more of a Ford issue rather than a NASCAR issue, since all but one of those fires happened under the blue oval banner. Now, that is a fair argument, but let's be honest with ourselves. This next-gen car has provided so many issues. The car is being too stiff, which is forcing drivers to get hurt, so much so that they're even being forced to sit out races. Denny Hamlin sat out at the Xfinity race at Darlington because he was still sore from his Daytona crash, and of course, Kurt Busch's crash at Pocono. Seeing parts are breaking, it happened earlier in the year and apparently still happening in today's world, where now we're catching on fire, tires destroying your day, at the very least sending you 4 or 5 laps down if you flat spot them. But like I said, some of these issues that I've mentioned have been addressed and or in the process of getting fixed. And yes, it is true that not all the incidents fall under the same banner. While all cars end with them catching on fire, the cause of it is different. For example, with Logano, Buescher, and Custer, for example, those 3 came from race damage, while Bowman, Briscoe, and Harvick's fires appeared with no damage from any other car. So while they all fall under the same category of cars catching on fire, the cause of it is completely different. But still, issues like this has caused a lot of skepticism not only throughout the garage but through the fans itself as to how reliable and how much can they trust with this next gen car. Time is going to be the key word in this situation with the safety aspect of the next gen car. Because it is a spec car, no longer can you make your own parts or make your own adjustments in the shop to help make your cars safer or at least more reliable. If there's an issue that you have with this next gen car, you got to go to NASCAR, and NASCAR has to make the solution. But why is this happening? Where we're seeing drivers getting hurt, or at the very least feeling the impacts a lot more. We're seeing cars catching on fire, parts breaking. What's going on? What's the reason for this? It's pretty simple. It's money. This is what Kevin Harvick had to say after his fire in Darlington.
The rocker panel just caught on fire. It's we just keep letting cars burn up, letting people crash into stuff, get hurt. Like, we don't fix anything. Now we just riding around out there and the car catches on fire. So just shitty parts.
Your attitude at this point, obviously, I mean, you've been frustrated anyway, but now it affects your race in the playoff.
Well, they don't care. It's cheaper to not fix it. How do we change it? Find somebody to run the show that can run it.
His car reportedly built up rubber and it got so hot against the exhaust which set the fire ablaze. However, in this video clip presented by his crew chief Rodney Childress, this only happens with cheap insulation. And this clip shows how fire can be contained when there is good insulation. Childress then went ahead in a deleted post on his Twitter, says let's put holes in the nose that will pick up every piece of rubber off the track. Let's mandate 75% open grill area going to the rocker boxes. Let's have a fan blowing air through that hose to make sure the rubber reaches the headers. Then once the rubber stacks up and catches fire, then we will have the equivalent of a leaf blower blowing oxygen on the fire and see how fast it gets a lot bigger. So if parts are failing at an alarming rate, causing cars to either not be able to finish the race or even worse, burn, then not only does a team owner have to replace the parts of a burnt up car, but it potentially puts the driver in danger of having to be forced to get out of a burning car, which is another issue that NASCAR forced themselves into a corner because of their new rule. If you get out of the car for any reason, you're automatically out of the race. So like with Chris Buescher, when he was catching a blaze at the Indy road course, he couldn't get out of the car because if he did, his race would be over. So he had to sat in the car, a burning car, hopefully it would go out on itself. But yeah, if all that is happening, and now with this next gen car being a spec car, the parts may be cheaper because it's a spec car and you're buying out of shop instead of creating yourself. But if the value isn't there and you're having to purchase more and replace more, it's going to cost you more good finishes, is it even worth it? I understand that whenever a new car gets rolled out, there's bound to be issues. It's completely normal. Back then, if there was an issue with the car, a change could have been made from the team's own shop so that they can improve it for the next race. This is different now. You no longer can't do that. If you have an issue, you have to wait for NASCAR to make the decision, approve it, and then you have to get their vendors ready to update their stuff with whatever change is necessary, and then you have to wait for the parts to be made, and then they can send them all out. I mean, we even had a parts shortage heading into the 2022 season, and they had time to get ready for this next-gen car, and we still had a parts shortage. All the teams can do is wait for NASCAR to make these decisions. And with how big these issues are with affecting drivers' lives, change needs to be made now, or at the very least, very, very soon for 2023. Now, could NASCAR be possibly doing something behind the scenes and not telling us? It's a possibility. Could they be telling the owner something that they're not telling us? Could be. I won't be surprised. But regardless, something needs to be done for next season that makes these cars safer, because the longer we wait, the more chances that something bad can really happen, whether through a crash or through a part failing. Regardless, something needs to be done before things get bad real fast. Here's the thing, I want this car to be a success. I want this next gen car to be the best car that NASCAR has ever put out, because if it becomes a success, then the sport as a whole is just going to get bigger and bigger, and it's going to improve for teams, fans, for everyone involved in the industry. And I do believe that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But with this car having to be bought out through a vendors list, change has to be made right now. It can't be made during the off season because then more than likely teams will once again have a parts shortage. Teams need to already start preparing for next season because we have 9 races to go before 2022 comes to a close. In its first season, the racing may be miles better and the car may look cooler than ever. But according to drivers, at the moment, this next gen car appears to be both unsafe and unreliable, and that needs to be fixed.